personally, when they told me I was going to be working on Iron Man 2, I didn't realize at the time how big obviously the experience would be.
Hey, I'm Ronnie from the AMC Studio. This is a podcast where we dig and dive deep into the scene and the culture of what it means to be in the media industry and hear from the people who have had a hand in building it. Welcome to Tea Talk with AMC Studios. Today we have Lionel Taillens with us. Hi Leo. So
Hello.
Today this is your podcast, I guess?
Yes, it is.
All
Thanks
right.
for having me.
Welcome. Thanks for coming. And Leo is a Senior Environment Generalist in Industrial Light and Magic, and he has been in this industry for more than a decade. Alright, so just his credits on blockbusters alone are enough to attest to how much diverse of an artist Leo is. And he's even in part of our favorite movies like the Avengers, Infinity Wars, Aquaman, A Quiet Place 2, and the most recent one, Free Man.
Yeah,
Was
Free
it?
Guy.
Free Guy,
Yes.
Free Guy. So of course we are super honored to have him here to talk to us today. So once again, thanks for joining us today, Leo.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me again.
So actually, back to the start of how we first met. Leo and I were classmates in 2004 in Nanyang Poly. So we were both like animation students, and obviously Leo has moved on so much, and he has been doing so much amazing works in the movie industries. And to start off, maybe Leo, why don't you just tell us about what you have been busy with recently?
Yes. I mean, right now what I'm working on is the Lord of the Rings TV show, and that's been keeping me busy for, I'd say, almost a year now. I'm still going to be working on until next year, early next year. So it's a massive project,
Right.
to be honest.
So since when does this movies that you're doing started?
I think I jumped on pretty much a year ago, last year November, I would say. Yes, if I remember correctly.
Okay,
yes, and that was when we first worked on the first episode.
Mm.
Yes, and we're wrapping either the first or the second episode. I'm not sure, but yeah, we're still going on with the continuing episodes.
So that's like the Lord of the Rings TV series?
Correct. Yes,
And
from
that will be on...
Amazon.
Oh,
The Amazon
okay.
platform.
I was having a discussion with you, and you told me that you were working in some very interesting shots. You mind like sharing with us like what kind of like things that you did or
Yes.
not?
I can't say too much because it's not out there yet.
Right,
But
okay.
it should come out soon. Potentially.
Okay.
I was told that it was going to be a marketing shot, but I haven't heard since.
Okay.
We'll actually come back to that after the holidays.
Okay.
So there will be a trailer that's dropping soon, potentially. I don't know when,
Okay.
but soon. We worked on the trailer. But that's all I can say right now.
All right, no problem. But stay tuned. By the time that the podcast release, which I don't know when, you might have already seen it, and then yeah. So again, as I mentioned earlier, right, during the intro, Leo has worked on several like blockbusters. His IMDb has credits that dated all the way back to 2009 or 2005.
2009.
2009. 2009. So my first questions to you is like, how do you like begin getting involved in all this like large scale project? Obviously, maybe you don't you start somewhere right before
Yes.
LucasFilm. Maybe
Yes.
you want to talk to us about that?
Okay, well, pretty much as soon as I graduated from NYP, I was already in touch with LucasFilm. I actually had a phone interview with them right after graduation.
Wow.
It didn't get through, unfortunately, but I kept in touch with them, and they, kept a record of my progress as well. And so in the meantime, I looked for another job that was somewhat similar to what I wanted to do at ILM, which was matte painting. So the closest I could find was architectural visualizations. So I did that for a year. And then eventually LucasFilm started their JUMP program, which was their internship program, where they bring in like several people from Singapore and start training them up for 6 months. And luckily they had a matte painting JUMP program, and that was the only one they ever did. So I was really, really lucky, and I managed to get in, along with other NYP people. And it worked out since then. And then as soon as they hired me after the 6 months training, that's when I just immediately started working on those big projects. So it's just like that.
So I mean, when you were working in the doing architecture, how long did you spend your time there? Right,
Pretty much a year.
a year.
Yeah,
Wow, that's
1
a
year.
really fast progress, I would say.
Yeah. Like I said, it was pure luck, really. I mean, the timing was perfect. Funny enough, another guy who was working with me at a company,
Right.
he also applied for the jump program, and we both got in. So we both, resigned at the company at the same
Oh
time.
no, I feel bad.
So
for
yeah, but he went on to become a really solid texture artist. I think he's now in Weta, so
Wow.
supervising probably. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Solid,
Okay.
solid
And how
artist.
long does the jump program take?
So at the time it was 6 months. Yes.
6 months.
So it was a bit of a risk. Not gonna lie. I took a salary cut
Yeah.
because it's a paid internship.
Right.
But at the time I didn't really think about it. I was like, oh wow, that's my chance.
Yeah.
Let's go for it. And it worked out. Right? I really didn't think about, oh, what if I don't get it. I was just like, just go in, do my thing, do as best as I can, learn as much as I can, and it'll work out somehow. And it did. So not all of them made it. Some people dropped out after the first 3 months. There was a review session. I think half of them dropped out
Wow,
in the
that's
first 3 months.
50% of it.
Yeah, almost half, I would say. And then since then, I think they retained about 4 or 5. I think we were a group of 12, if I remember correctly. And we were all pretty much locals. Some from Malaysia,
Right.
but mostly Singaporeans. But since that program, I'm the only one left in the company. Everyone else has left.
And that is like through a span of like 10 years?
Yeah, I would say so.
Wow.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Some are still in the industry. Others have gone on to do completely different things. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I think I did tell you before that I did got an offer from the jump program as well.
Right. You should have taken it.
Yeah,
You should
man.
have
Yeah,
taken
but
it.
I mean the reason I didn't take it is
Mm.
also because
Yes.
there's a lot of things that I wanted to learn, and I didn't want to like stick on to I mean, which may or may not be a right decision to make. Right? I just like I felt that I still have a lot to learn in the current company.
Sure.
So I was still doing like animations and VFX in Blackmagic Design, which is one of like the well-known companies as well. It's just that we do more like broadcast and TV commercials, right, compared to feature film.
Yeah.
So who knows,
Yeah, same, but different.
Yeah, I mean, but different. Who knows
Yeah.
where you are, And yeah, I mean, this is something that, as you can see, so Leo, who has stuck through for like 10 years, and how successful he has become, he will soon to be be a lead artist very soon. When
Soon.
will that be? Do you want to tell us?
Right after the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, man, that
Right
will be
after that.
2002, 2012, 2022.
22, yeah, 22.
Wow.
I don't know what project yet, but
Yeah.
I'll find out next month,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Congratulations
Thank
on
you,
that.
thank you.
So, all right. How do you know that like being in the creative industry was something that you wanted, and how do you find your way to where you are today?
It's a good question. I think I was always into computer stuff, graphics, like we were saying just now, building computers. I always enjoyed that since I was really young, like maybe 13, 12 years old. And even back then, I was already doing graphic design, just using Photoshop a lot. I like to do pretty images, like pretty graphics. And I think from there, it just progressed slowly into motion graphics, and eventually I felt the need to learn 3D, and that's why I joined NYP, because that was the only school at the time that was really teaching 3D, while having the fundamentals of art and design, and they had good connections with Lucasfilm as well.
Wow.
So I already knew that. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It seems like
exactly.
you already know before
I did
you
my
join.
research.
Yeah. It seems like you already know where you are. You want to be even before you enroll in a poly.
Even
also.
before moving to Singapore, yeah.
Even before moving to Singapore.
Yes.
Wow, and that was how old is that? How old were you?
Pretty much 17, 18. Yeah.
And you were in Switzerland.
I was in Switzerland, yes.
Wow. Wow. So that's like foresight.
Foresight, yeah. Yeah, and I felt like that's one thing that has always come up again, over and over again, where you have to have like a specific goal in mind. And as soon as you have a goal, you'll work your way, from A to B. It may not always work out, but then you find another way, as long as you know exactly where you want to be. I think that helps
Wow.
define, your journey.
So would you have said that you have reached your goal and moving on to your next goal? And what
Yes, I would say so. I think every 5 years, I feel like I need to set myself a new goal. Recently, it's been a bit harder because I haven't really defined what I want it to be. But a good question that you can ask yourself is, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years?
Oh, that's like a
Right.
standard
Standard
interview
interview question, exactly. But it's so useful because it gets you thinking, like, well, what, 5 years from now, where do I want to be?
Yeah.
And then that's where you start thinking and planning. And once you get your goal, how do I get there? What do I need to do? Who do I need to talk to? What do I need to prepare? And so on and so on. So that was my process
Wow.
at the time.
That was actually very good because it gives you thoughts and it gives you like an idea how to fill in the gaps, right?
Exactly, it gives you a direction.
Yeah.
Right. If you lack a direction, it's really hard to do anything really. I'm sure you have the same. You know where you want to be,
Yep.
and you just figure it out on the way.
Yeah. I mean, I hit my head across like a lot of like walls.
Yeah, exactly, and that's part of the journey, right?
Yeah.
And it's important, and experience. As long as you learn from it, I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, I mean, life is up and down,
Yes,
But
yes.
what's important is that you are moving forward, right?
Exactly, and bringing it back to my first interview with LucasFilm, like I would say like a lot of people would be like demotivated after being rejected.
Yeah.
Saying like, oh no, I'm just not good enough. I didn't feel that way. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm not ready yet. I'll just keep on working, and then I'll keep in touch, and I'll check again next year, see how I go. So,
Wow.
pro tip.
Yeah, pro tips. So don't get like dejected so soon. You still have a
Yes.
long way to go.
Still a long way to go.
So now you're currently working in Industrial Light and Magic, and you have been there since 2015. But hey, I think you were there since 2008, right?
Yes, correct.
And then you left in 2013
Yes,
and came back in 2015 till now,
yes.
right? You want to talk to us about like in what you were doing in, I think, double negative?
Yeah, I jumped over to double negative when it was still in Singapore, which was just across the street. Really, at the time.
Were you
So
doing
I-
the same thing,
Yeah, you go, during lunchtime you go for interview, you come back. But yeah, I mean they approached me and I figured, okay, yeah, sure, let's try something new. And that was a good experience too. I really liked DNEG too. It was a different experience because they did not have the same department as what we have in ILM. So being a generalist is very specialized in environments only, and that's not just specific to 3D or 2D, it's like a combination. It's a mixed media department. And in DNEG, they had a very strict separated department. So they had the 2D matte painters department, and then they had the 3D guys, the lighters, the modelers, the environment team. So when I came in, I didn't really fit anywhere. I was put in the 2D department initially because that's still my background, like matte painting.
Right.
But somehow I managed to create a new department, and I was right in the middle. So that was kind of nice because no one really knew how to place me, and I was always getting my notes directly from the supervisor, which was nice. So I didn't have a department supervisor to talk to, and yeah, it was great. Eventually, ILM came back to me and asked me to come back, and the timing was perfect at the time because a few weeks after I accepted ILM's offer to come back, DNEG announced that they were closing down shop.
Oh man, you're lucky.
So I lucked out. Again, luck. I mean, it's pure luck and timing, man. I have to say, and that's something that no one really saw coming. So everyone came to me and was like, "How'd you know?" I didn't know. I had no idea. It was just they came to me. I didn't go look for them. So yeah, that was a 2 years gap, and then since then, yeah, I've joined back the ILM Generalist department, and a lot of the guys from the DNEG department came along as well. So I mean, they were looking for jobs too.
and
Yeah.
a lot of them are like, still
They
looking.
didn't get a good, competitive offer, obviously, because they didn't have.
So I suppose you get a competitive offer because you came.
They looked
Before,
for me.
yeah, they looked for you
They
and
looked for
before
me,
this
that was
thing happened,
before it was
right?
official. Yeah, that's correct.
Wow. So, it has been already a while since you started working on multiple projects. How do you know that like Lucasfilm was the right home for you, or maybe it wasn't? How do you know?
I mean, it's ILM, right?
The
they're
brand
best.
name is alone.
They're the best. It was that or Weta, but everyone knows ILM is the top dog, and it really shows. I think now that I've been part of it, you can tell by the way they review shots. It's very accurate. It's very on the nose, and they do tend to make the shots look a lot better. Like there will be times where when I'm watching a regular movie that's done by a different studio, I would spot certain mistakes in the shots, and I'm thinking in my head like, oh, that would never fly at ILM. Like, oh, we would have fixed that for sure. So it is a different ball game sometimes.
Wow.
I can tell the difference. Yeah, DNEG was a bit more relaxed, I would say, not as strict. But they just have a different approach, I would say, a different way of approaching things and different pipeline too, way different. But I still prefer ILM's way because they've trained me in that way too, so I'm more comfortable there now.
Wow.
For sure.
Okay, that's cool. And one of the few like official movies that you have gotten credit for was Iron Man 2 back in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like back when the MCU was taking its break, and when the first Iron Man came out, people were kind of like marveled by it. So how do you like react when you got the chance to be involved in the second one, and how do you like actually get involved?
Personally, when they told me I was going to be working on Iron Man 2, I didn't realize at the time how big, obviously, the MCU is going to be. So yes, it was exciting, but I didn't really know. Like I wasn't like, oh wow, that's the biggest thing ever, right? And to be fair, I have to say, like I've only worked on it for 2 weeks actually, so I got the credit, but it's unjustified.
Right.
I jumped on the project very early on. It was, I think I was working on a trailer shot of Stark Expo, and that's about it. It was more of a concept thing, and then they pulled me over to another project. So I actually don't know why they gave me the credit.
You deserve it.
Maybe not. But I remember the team. They worked really hard because they were facing a lot of technical struggles rendering the Stark Expo. I remember that. They were just they didn't have the hardware to actually render the whole sequence.
Wow. Then in the end, how do you guys like manage to produce it?
I think they had to buy more powerful hardware in the end. Yeah. It was a bit of a struggle.
Wow.
I remember that.
Wow. But then, as an artist yourself, right? You are not just a like environment artist. You do have other wide skill sets. I think, other than like specializations, you do modeling, editing, as well as some filmmaking experience, among others. Am I right to say that?
I would say I wouldn't call myself a modeler,
Right.
to be honest. I know how to model, but I'm not an expert in it, like your traditional hard surface modeling. I've always been more doing modeling more, I hate to say the word, but organic objects like grounds, terrains, obviously environment specific. In terms of editing, actually not really. I have to say more like I would say compositing, yes.
Right.
And that just comes through working on shots, dealing with the compositor. You just pick things up naturally. So now I would say I can definitely composite my own shots. But it's all still very environment specific.
Right.
Very environment centric.
Right. Like as an environment artist yourself, 3D environment artist yourself, you do like basic like environment modeling. You do like texturing. You do like your own compositing.
Yes.
Right. So, we do have like for us, right? When we look into like whether is this person a specialist or is this person a generalist, right? It does has a different kind of like scope in terms of how ILM identifies, right? When you
Correct.
say that you are a generalist,
Yes.
now what exactly is a generalist?
Yeah. Yes. So a generalist at ILM is environment-centric. We deal mostly with environments. Outside of ILM, when you say generalist, it would be someone who knows how to animate, who knows how to rig, how to do some effects, how to, composite and do everything really in the pipeline. The term generalist evolved sometime in 2012 at ILM. We used to be called Digimat because that was the fundamental skill set that we had at the time. And then we just gradually evolved into a 3D department, but still just only environments. And that was just the nature of how the work has evolved. It became more and more complex, a lot more CG, full CG environments. So the matte painting process started to show its age. It was too restrictive. I remember during a review session, like one of the supervisors would ask me, "Oh, do you have a spec pass for one of the projections that I did?" I'm like, "No, I don't." It's like I have to create my own spec pass in Photoshop, and that's really what happened. And then eventually they decided to change the department name to generalist, and that was really just to define the 2D 3D approach. And we started to hire more and more 3D artists instead. And now I consider myself a 3D artist as well, but with some 2D DNA left as a fundamental.
It must be a very rare.
It is. It's surprisingly rare, yes, because you have a lot of 2D matte painters, but who don't know a lot of 3D. And then you've got the opposite. You've got a lot of 3D artists, but they don't know how to project certain things or how to not model something in 360 turntable fashion. So it is a rare thing to find like a hybrid who knows when to use 3D and when to apply a 2D technique to certain things.
Yeah, because I mean, based on what I see, right, 2D artists they are usually very good at aesthetic.
Yes.
But they are very poor at technical stuff, which is like very computer.
Yes.
You cannot
very
go two
numbers
ways.
driven.
Yeah,
right?
there's never two ways. So
Correct.
it's really a hard find. So if LucasFilm find one, I think they should keep it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Forever.
We're on the lookout for sure right now. Yeah.
So you guys know where to.
So for any
send your
listeners
real
out there, if you are interested and you have the skill set that we need, do apply.
So these questions is I think you already mentioned, but let me just ask you again. How do you know you want to specialize in this very specific field? For instance, like environment.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I think that was back in NYP. I remember because it was the animation track, right? So I would say 80% of the people there wanted to become animators.
Yeah.
At some point, me too. I was like, oh, that's kind of fun, animating stuff. But then I saw too much competition. I'm like, oh, there's a lot of animators out here. So let me do something else. And matte painting was definitely one of my strengths because I knew I was quite experienced with Photoshop already at the time. So I figured, hey, less competition out here. So I guess I was right. And even now, I think at ILM, a lot of the NYP graduates, most of them are either in Roto or animation.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that is just bring you back to context. Back in 2004, we were in animations specialization. There was 200 of us, right? At least.
Yeah, we were 200. Yeah, correct.
So that's the amount of competition that we have.
Very few made it.
Unfortunately. Yeah. So okay, obviously now you have made it, and your specialization is 3D environment specialist.
Yes.
And you mentioned that the difference between specialist and generalist, right? And there's something that is very interesting that I find when you talk about in previous years or in the early days, a lot of the backgrounds are projected. So does it mean that you still use projection, or is it much less compared to last time?
You mean nowadays?
Yeah, nowadays.
Still?
Yeah, if not, what else? What are you doing in terms of environment?
Good question. Yes. We still do when it makes sense. We do less of it. Even for me now, I tend to prefer just going full 3D just because it's easier to set up. It's submit it to the farm, hit render, that's it. You don't have to deal with the projection issues. But sometimes where if I'm looking at a sequence and the camera is more or less in the same spot, looking in different directions, and there's no parallax happening, then I would consider projecting things. I think recently I did a projection just to fix a technical issue. I was trying to scatter like self-illuminated lights on a mountain, and the render just kept giving me errors like artifacts and flickering. So in the end, I just ended up projecting those lights onto the 3D geometry just to fix the render issues. And yeah, that's just one way to use projections, or even project. We still use that technique to up-res certain assets that were done in the main line that don't always hold up really up close or in certain conditions. And when they lack the time to actually go back to the modeling process and the texturing and the lighting, so they would come to us and say like, hey, can you do a patch to up-res this thing or to dirty it up, add some more textures on top of it. And we've just done that recently for one of the Lord of the Rings trailer shots. So we had to jump in and dirty up, like there was a bridge that we needed to dirty up and make it more lived in because it looked very CG.
Right.
So they still come to us for these kind of requests quite often. Yeah.
Okay. So those are really like rendered from 3D rendered.
Yes.
And then you have to sort of like paint over a 3D render?
Basically, yeah. I mean, it will depend on the situation. I personally like to paint over on the raw render,
Right.
Even sometimes in the different channels, let's say the diffuse channel.
Right, right.
But sometimes it could be on the plate as well. Like maybe the set that they filmed didn't quite hold up. It was too simple looking. So I recently had a shot where I had to merge the end of the set and the CG, and there was so much detail in the CG that the set didn't hold up, so I had to make some kind of transition between the two.
Softer than
Dirty up the plates, the set, or simplify the CG to make a more seamless blend between the two as the camera pans up. So that's one of the things that we do in the Gen department, where there's no real there's no one way to do and approach a certain problem. They let us figure that one out, and that's the strength of our department. Is where we do a lot of those troubleshooters, fixes in a efficient and quick way.
Right.
Yeah, basically that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, speaking of which, I'm actually really curious about like your work process. For example, let's say you have been assigned to this big project, maybe the recent one like the Free Guy and A Quiet Place 2 as well.
Mm-hmm.
No, how would your work process from getting the project brief to conceptualizing the environment to maybe the finished work as well?
Mm-hmm.
How does it work from point A, from the start to the end?
A lot of times, the most classic situation is you get a plate. Let's say it's a set extension that you need to do. You look at the plate. They may have some artwork, some concept, and then you simply follow that. You start, pulling together assets that maybe the modeling team already has assembled for you, so you can just kit bash it together. And then you go through the process. You start to block in your geometries. Then you do a first pass of textures, and then you present it. We generally present our shots in a composite, like we do comp it. We don't show like turntables of the model. We sometimes show like a gray render of the blocking just to get a buy off on the layout.
Right.
And then once that's done, we just go straight to the final look of it. So we texture, we light it, and we comp it. And then that's when we present it for feedback. So we skip a few steps.
Right.
We don't go through, okay, what about these textures? Do you like these textures? Then what about this lighting? Do you like this light? No, we skip all that. We just go straight to the final image. That's, I would say, 70% of the time that's the case. Other times it'll be less straightforward, where you have to figure out a look. They'll give you some ideas, some directions. Like, yeah, I think what they want is maybe a silhouette of a landmass in the far background that's covered in mist. I was like, okay.
So it's up to your own
Up to you.
interpretation.
Yeah. So you start suggesting. That's your job. So you come up with a version. What do you think of this? I'm like, the shape's not quite right. I'll push it further back, and then that's how you start. The process, and then eventually they show a version that they're comfortable with to the client, and then we get feedback.
Right.
These tend to be a bit more time consuming because you don't know what they want, so you have to read minds.
It's like a blank canvas, right?
Blank
and
canvas.
It's so subjective on
Yes,
personally.
but it can be fun for us too,
Right.
because then you really can suggest stuff, and that's where your own creative input comes into play. And that super exciting shot I was telling you about for Lord of the Rings, that was one of those situations where it was a full CG shot. They did shoot a plate for it, but the camera movement of that, it felt really boring. So what happened was the art department, which is basically the concept department, they came up with a new version of the camera move with some basic geometries. And then once they got it approved, they passed it over to me. So I received the camera, I received the blocking geometry that they worked with, and then I just started up-resing the geometry, started to scatter the all the set dressing, and start messing around with the lighting too. And then from there I was pretty much I was still using the concept as a guide, as a rough guide, but I mostly suggested my own take of it. Also looking at the rest of the sequence, obviously. Like, it's not just completely out of the blue, right? But that was a really fun process because it really gives you somewhat a creative control, and that's how you start working with the supervisors, or even the clients. And that one worked out pretty well. They were pretty happy with what I've suggested, and there wasn't a whole lot of feedback. Sometimes most of the feedback would come more like, oh no, we can't have that here because of so and so reasons, or because of the cut. Like, oh no, we don't see that in the next cut, so we can't have that. So it'd be more like general notes, like, oh, we need to have a certain perspective for that shot, or it has to be a specific time of the day. Those kinds of notes is fair. It's like, sure, okay, that's part of the storytelling.
And the continuity, right?
And the continuity, yes, correct. But mostly, like, it was, no one bothered me, which is great. They just let me work on it, and I think it turned out great. Everyone was super happy. So hopefully you guys get to see it soon, because that's one of my proudest
And
moments.
you guys need to subscribe to Amazon Prime, right?
Yeah, get a subscription.
Yeah, there's so much nowadays. Like, you have Netflix, you have like Disney Plus,
Yes.
Amazon Prime.
Oh,
Okay, your work obviously is super impressive, and you have 23 credits so far, and of all of them of like some huge stature. So how do you think like a Hollywood film or project differs from the other works that you have done? Obviously, other than in terms of skills, what are the how different are they compared to the different projects?
and by different projects, you mean like,
For
let's say
example,
regional?
Yeah, or even for example, like
films.
it could be a TV series versus a movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go with the TV series versus feature film.
Yeah.
I think that one's actually not as clear cut as I thought it would be, because my initial thinking before working on a TV show was always like, okay, it's the budget is completely different, right?
Yeah.
And the timeline
I
is
would have
different.
assumed so.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
But I guess Lord of the Rings, that's a special case, because they've got a huge budget
For a TV series.
for a TV show, and so the difference in the way we approach that TV is not any different than any feature film,
Wow.
which surprised me too.
Yeah.
It may not be the efficient way of approaching it, but that's the way we're doing it right now. I think with a series like The Mandalorian, they're a little bit more aware of the timeline and the budget restrictions. so we do move through the process a little faster. So it really depends on the project, the directors, and the team that's attached to it, right? But mostly budget restrictions that will dictate how fast you move along. So yeah, surprisingly, nowadays the difference between feature and TV series is not that big.
Wow.
But that could be, the ILM way of approaching things. I'm sure other studios, they have a completely different approach as well. But I can only speak of ILM. So
Okay. So I would say like the budget is the one that defines whether or not how fast the project moves. Like
exactly.
you
Yeah.
mentioned. Okay.
It defines how nitpicky you are with your feedback.
Right.
So yeah, sometimes I wonder too on the Lord of the Rings, like why we spend so much time on these small little things, but they approach it like a feature film, like it's the most, it's another trilogy kind of thing.
Wow.
So
And the TV show, how many episodes is there? I mean, if you
that
don't
I
mind
don't
sharing.
know. I think it's maybe 8 episodes
episodes,
for
okay.
one season,
Wow.
as far as I know. Yeah, and I think we've touched on 4 episodes now.
Wow.
There are other studios involved. I think we do work hand in hand with Weta.
Okay.
But yeah, it feels like just any other feature film that I've worked on. Like there's no difference.
It looks like it's gonna be very massive.
It's huge. Yeah, it's massive. It's gonna look beautiful too because it's the visual effects is so refined to like a Star Wars level.
Ooh.
It's just it looks beautiful for sure. I mean they have to. They almost have to.
Right.
You can't expect a low budget Lord of the Rings. It just doesn't. It doesn't compute, right?
Yeah.
But I think the way they approach Mandalorian is a bit more TV show friendly, I would
Right.
say. Like, I think they're using stagecraft, for instance, for some real-time rendering.
Yeah.
So we're approaching things in a more assetized manner. So just recycling and reusing assets that we have and just putting things together and using like previous seasons setups as well. So that one is a little bit more fast-paced, for
Right.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But not that much different than a regular feature film. The virtual
One thing
projection.
about like
Yeah.
Mandalorian, interesting thing about Mandalorian is that they featured stagecraft,
Yes.
which is essentially the virtual production,
Mhm.
right? So in terms of this new technology, do you personally think that it's more efficient and faster or budget friendly in a sense?
Personally, yes, I would say every time you capture everything you can in camera, I mean, that saves you a ton of time. You don't have to deal with extractions or even compositing. Well, I mean, there's still going to be compositing to fix things up. But yeah, if you can get everything in the camera already, that's gold. That's very efficient. So I'm on board for that, for sure. But not everything was done in stagecraft, obviously.
Yeah.
What we've touched on in Singapore was just the regular, visual effects approach. So we didn't have to deal with any of the real-time rendering that the stagecraft technology offers. All of that stuff is actually done in the London office.
Oh.
Yeah,
Wow.
because they have all the stagecraft sets set up there, and in the US, and I think recently in Australia as well. I could be wrong about that though, but just not in Singapore. So
Is there a reason why? Like,
maybe space. I don't know.
Singapore real
Or just
estate is
demand.
expensive.
Yeah, I do know that there's a lot of demand for stagecraft, like
Right.
more and more, from directors and other projects. So I think that industry is gonna boom for
Right.
sure.
but do you see yourself like or your team getting involved more in
Eventually, I would
stagecraft?
say so. Yeah, eventually. Right now, it doesn't seem like it, but because they do have a specialized team that works with this.
Right.
But I don't know how soon we'll get to be involved in that.
Right.
It's a different approach as well.
Yeah.
Because you have to prepare your assets to render in real time.
Yeah.
But I think they're getting better and better at optimizing their assets and making a one-to-one
Yeah.
transfer
Yeah.
from a regular cinematic asset to a real-time renderable asset.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I think it's just a matter of a couple of years before we start dealing with real time as well.
Okay. I mean, it's progressing really fast because I've been following this space for, I think, since like the last 2 years. And the way I see a lot of the demo videos for Unreal Engine is like insane.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that definitely made an impact even over here. So
Yeah.
I think on Free Guy we did try and consider using Unreal,
Okay.
but I think it didn't work out for some licensing issues.
Right.
I think there was something going on behind the scenes. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not the technical issues, but
It's not.
licensing
It wasn't
issues.
the technical.
Okay.
Yeah, it was licensing.
Okay. Okay.
Because
okay.
I was down with it. I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's test it out. But unfortunately, yeah, it didn't work out.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Out of all the projects you have worked on so far, which one will be, or will you consider your favorite or your proudest involvement in?
My proudest would be the Lord of the Rings TV show.
The recent one?
The recent one, most
Okay.
recent one. I think that one has some of my best works in there.
Wow.
My favorite, the one favorite show that always sticks in my mind was The Last Airbender. For some reason, it was a horrible show, but for some reason, working on it was quite
Censor
alright.
that out.
Yeah, exactly. That was
No, it's okay.
yeah, it was The Last Airbender was a pleasant experience for me, at least, and I don't know why, but I think it was partially due to my supervisor in SF. He just worked it all out. Like, it was just seamless. The assets that you bring in worked. You just block in your houses, your environments. You hit render, put it on the farm, get it approved. Yeah, it was very seamless. And on a general term, I personally prefer smaller projects, like where it's a more intimate team, less convoluted CGI, where you're dealing with a lot of plates and shot plates. That's my personal favorite. Doing some projection works with 3D extensions of sets. That's always my comfort zone. Just because it's straightforward. You just match your CG to the plate. You got a good reference. It's straightforward work. You don't have to think so much and trying to figure out how I'm going to approach this. It's just do the work. Get it in front of the client and get some feedback.
Right. So is the Last Airbender like one of the smaller ones or
Medium.
Medium.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So we have talked about the best and greatest stuff that you have done in LucasFilm ILM, and just want to ask, like, outside of ILM, what are the things that you are doing or you have a chance to do?
So, whenever I get the time, I think time is the important factor. But when I do have time, I still do enjoy graphic design a lot. So on the side, I do either freelance work, whether it's for like more commercial stuff. Like I think I worked with Wen Hao multiple times, our buddy from NYP, working on just products, posters and stuff like that. But also promotional flyers and ads for like a gym that I attend, like a boxing gym. So mostly 2D stuff, actually, I would say. So away from the VFX, complex 3D work. But recently I did feel the need that I should, go back and doing some more personal artwork. Just to learn more tools, newer tools. Houdini is something that I need to start learning.
Yeah, that's a huge learning curve there.
It is, exactly. Yeah, so I need to start get into that too, because I think eventually we'll have to move on to that software too, the ILM. That'll become like the main tool eventually.
Okay. So for
those who don't know, right now, at least in Singapore, in the generalist department, we're using 3ds Max with V-Ray for our 3D package. That's the main tool, but on the sides we use all sorts of different programs like ZBrush, obviously Photoshop, sometimes even TerraGen, or what else? any like third-party app that you may have used before, like whatever gets the job done, we've used it. But as long as everything goes through the Max software, everything is a go.
Wow. But then it's the change to Houdini is almost like you are a like sort of FX artist yourself already, right?
Yeah.
So I mean,
It's a different approach. Yeah.
it's, when I look at the interface, honestly, I don't think it's as user friendly in a sense. You
Yes,
know.
I agree. I agree. I did see that. I think they're trying to make the next version a bit more user friendly, because the learning curve really is quite steep, and it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna learn it anyway, but it'll be a bit of a struggle for sure.
Yeah, agree. But then in that case, does it mean that it will be a lot more 3D centric in terms of what you're doing if you are
Possibly.
heading towards like Houdini, right?
It's possible, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's some kind of projection methods in there too somewhere. I wouldn't know, but it may sound more 3D centric, but the way we approach shots and environments will still be the same.
Right.
It's just going to be through a different tool.
Okay.
I mean, some of the strengths that Houdini does provide for us is all their procedural tools, and for, let's say, creating terrains, or even on the current show, Lord of the Rings, we've used Houdini to create multiple buildings and houses, to set dress like massive cities. So it makes sense
Yeah.
in certain situations, for sure. But then you run into the problem, which we've already seen, where everything looks procedural. So it looks too perfect. It looks cold, computer generated. So that's where you have to think of ways to create imperfections in your imagery. And I think that's where Houdini shows its weaknesses, I would say. I'm sure people out there are much better than me. They can work out
Right.
how to make imperfections in a procedural way, but yeah, I'm not there yet. That's out of my game.
Right. Okay. Just now we mentioned about the Disney Plus series, which is the Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about like they are working on stagecraft and virtual productions, right? So just now, did you mention like what were your involvement in Mandalorian?
Yes, actually Singapore was quite involved, specifically with the crate dragon sequence.
Okay.
That big creature going through the sand.
Oh yeah.
That was
Remember
all done in
the one that got blasted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So all of that was done here, the whole sequence, and
The whole sequence.
Yeah,
It's
whole
a
sequence.
full CG sequence with the
mostly full CG. Mostly,
Right.
yes. There was a lot of projection works that we did.
Mm.
So I ended up setting up a projection nuke setup so that we could reuse it multiple times with different. Just drop in the camera
Right.
and have it rendered in multiple ways.
Right.
So that was, and I used a lot of photography for that one. So they went to, I think it was Jordan, to take a lot of environment photography,
Right.
and I used all of that to just reproject.
So reproject what the dunes, is it? The sand dunes?
Yeah, the
or-
dunes, some of the mountainous structures. I just reprojected a lot of that back onto simple geometry, and it was all set up in Nuke. And so, for the most part, I set up I think maybe 2 or 3 different angles, and drop into different cameras, and it would mostly work without a problem. So it was a more efficient approach. Yeah.
Okay, but that's not like a virtual production, right? That's
No,
more
that's the traditional feature film approach.
Oh,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
we didn't do any of the real time
Right.
sequences. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we initially thought that everything is shot like in stagecraft,
Yeah,
but obviously I don't think so.
It's not,
Yeah.
it's not, no. I think there's still some limitations. I remember seeing some behind the scenes between the stuff they did in season 1 that they've learned and applied to season 2. And I think one of the main things they were struggling with was the lighting intensity, because it's in season 1, everything that they shot in real time with the screen behind always felt very dim.
Right.
Very, it just didn't feel right. So they couldn't create that intensity that outdoor sunlight would create.
Right.
But I think they fixed that in season 2.
Oh.
So
okay.
it was a lot more advanced version of stagecraft.
So the lighting.
Lighting, I think they improved that a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. Okay. Now next question is a lot of your specialties lies in like VFX department, right? And as we know, Singapore, small island, VFX is a very niche industry or market. So, what are your thoughts about like being or someone who is in the VFX industry and based in Singapore?
That one's a tricky one because my answer would have been different maybe 2 years ago.
Okay.
Now, since the pandemic, things are a lot more flexible.
Okay.
Because you can work from home, you can work from anywhere for any company, really.
Well, the world is really your oyster now,
yes,
right?
Yes, and I think that's something that I realized recently too. Like a studio from Australia approached me,
right?
Like, hey, do you want to join our company? I was like, well, can I work from here? It's like, yes, can. So I can work from anywhere, really. I can stay here in Singapore comfortably at home, working for London, Australia. So it doesn't matter anymore.
But how does because like a lot of the stuff that you do are private and confidential, right? How does that work then? Because remotely, they might have some things that it might.
There's always a risk that somebody at home is gonna take a screenshot or a video of your work.
Right.
And that's what happened with the Spider-Man one, I think, with the trailer, one of the earlier trailer.
Right.
Like, one of the producer's son was filming with his phone the screen, and then uploaded it online. So that can always happen. But I have to say, like, so far, I don't think we had any problems, security problems. It just works. And I think that's something that shocked me too. As soon as the lockdowns kicked in, the switch to working remotely was pretty seamless, which I always thought that would have the whole security and all the NDA and secrets and all the IPs that we're working on, that would have been a problem working from home. But apparently it's fine, like we haven't had any leaks. It's been a smooth transition from working at the office to working from home.
But I mean, apart from that, right? You still have like tangible things like like hardwares and softwares. Then how does it work then? Do you have like adequate hardware and softwares?
Yeah, I mean, you I don't know about other studios, but at least here, well, I can't really talk about that.
Right.
But it's what you would imagine, like using a VPN or a secured line that you run from your computer, or even have your own little device that the company provides to you to connect.
Oh, it's like remote access.
Yeah, remote access to the systems in the office inside. So everybody has a different version of it. So
Right.
I think it's just a technical thing, right? Like however you want to set it up, whatever you feel is the most secure way of doing it, and whatever is lag free. As an artist, the only thing you care about is it lag free? Can I is the compression of the image good enough so that I can judge the quality of my pixels?
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. That's all you care about.
Yeah. So I mean, the important thing is that right now, the world is open up, especially during, or rather, it has hastened up, because I think sooner or later we will be in this stage, right, where we can work anywhere, because we are in the digital space anyway. So you can work literally anywhere around the world. Companies can hire anyone around the world as well. So yeah, it's just
definitely not
faster,
a technical restriction anymore, for sure.
Yeah,
it's not.
This whole I feel that this whole pandemic is just hastening up this process.
Yeah, I can definitely see the change that's happened. There's more demand in content, like not enough artists.
Too much people staying at home.
Yeah, exactly. People need to be entertained. So there's a lot of demand for content creators.
Right.
And that means artists, graphic designers, productions, films, everything. So I would say it's a good time for artists really to get into that career. I think there's a lot of work out there, a lot. I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
So A lot of my friends who set up their own studios as well, they say like they can't keep up with all the demand for work. They just don't have the artists. to do it.
Yeah. That's what my worry is. Like you have jobs, but whether can you deliver it? You know, you're
Exactly.
level.
Yeah. That's a good problem to have, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're so fully booked that you have to reject work,
Yeah.
you know, it's the best scenario.
Wow, good point. Now, being in the industry for more than a decade now, you know, as an old timer yourself,
Emotional damage.
have you ever like thought of like switching lanes or professions, or you know, what is it that push your passion to stay in this creative line?
It's the passion. I mean, I still enjoy making pretty images. That's still my go-to thing. Just there's some tasks sometimes, or a certain point in the development where I really enjoy it. Like when you're doing the finishing touches,
Yeah.
that's just the best for me. Like it's really enjoyable, just adding details here and there. So I have thought about changing industries, but I still do enjoy the work. So it's a tough one. But I'm still gonna stick to it. It's still just enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you as in, like, you know, the creative process of it, like especially when you create something, you know, the achievement from there. When you first started, you know, on a project or task, you're not really sure where you are, you know, a lot of like conflicting thoughts.
Or
right?
you're shy to present your work.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. It's a very stressful situation. You know, even receiving notes, like but now the older you get, the more experience you get, it just becomes less stressful, less complicated, and there will be there's certain aspects of the whole process that are enjoyable in the end. There's still like certain struggles, obviously, when there's a constant loop of feedback, back and forth. But in the end, if you look at the picture, you kind of forget all of that, and you say like, oh wow, that's actually, it was worth it.
Yeah.
You know, it was worth putting that extra effort to make this pretty image that everyone is enjoying. And I think one good example was that one screenshot that Amazon released for the Lord of the Rings series. That was done by my good friend Yorick Dozy out here in Singapore too, and it was just, you know, it went viral because it looked good. It's a fantastic shot. He spent a lot of time on it, just refining, and it really shows. And I think, it was tough. Like, I was watching him go through the process, and I was like, oh my god, that's so painful. But in the end, like, you forget all of that, and you look at the final image and like, okay, that was worth it. That looks really cool. And that's basically it. That's what keeps me going.
Wow.
Yeah, it's enjoyable when you create something, and then people look at it and they enjoy it. It's like, that's great too. That's
all for the audience.
It's all for the
For
people.
the audience, man, for the people.
Yeah, that is the satisfying part. Yeah.
Now, obviously, also you have been working in the industry in the movie for so long, since 2009.
Yeah.
During this journey, how do you think you have grown as a creative yourself?
That's a great question, because I started thinking about it, and it's only recently that I started to notice the progress that I've had. In the first couple of years as an artist, I think you're solely focusing on your art, on your skill, just refining, whether it's the technical skill that you have with the software or just training your eye to see certain things. You're just only focusing on that, just become a better artist. And then recently I noticed that I've grown as an artist for sure, but my position has changed. So the more experience you have, now I started to realize that I need to share with the younger generation, or the junior artists, or the mid-level artists. So, and that's become really more apparent recently, even at work, where they just naturally put me in a position where I have to teach other people, or I have to mentor, or even they ask me for my creative input, like, well, what do you think about this? And that's when it started to click, like, okay, I've reached that point where I've become more of a consultant rather than just your regular grunt artist. So it's a nice transition, and other things in life, getting married, having a child, it puts things in perspective too. Like you want to have your priority changes. So even though I still enjoy working and doing my art, I have to think about my time management. So I have to. One of the things I've gotten better at is definitely time management and communication. I'd say. I think that's probably the biggest thing, besides the obvious things like training my eye, getting better with the softwares. That's a given, but I think communication is key to grow, in my opinion. And by communication, I mean how to either present your work to other people, or describe your intentions and set expectations when you're doing it. So when I present my work in progress shot, for instance, I would say, okay, I have done this. These are the new things that I'm working on. I still have this and that to do. It'll take me about 1 or 2 days to figure that one out. I'll show another update in, let's say in the next couple days. So you're setting expectations. And you have to do that, especially as a generalist, because we've had meetings before with supervisors from different departments where they were complaining that they don't know what to comment on whenever we are presenting something, because they know we do a bit of everything. So they don't know whether they should comment on the textures or the lighting or the compositing or the modeling. So they rely on us to say, what do you want me to comment on, right? And it is quite apparent when you see juniors present their work sometimes. It's sometimes difficult for them to describe what their intentions are, or at what stage they're at when they're presenting the work. And I think that's something that you just learn along the way. But definitely an important part of the process. I think that's been always my feedback, my yearly reviews, communication, how to present and set expectations.
I think it's a good point, because I realize a lot of us, like especially like Asian, right? We are very poor in communicating or expressing our own ideas and thoughts out. Right, that's where we actually lack off.
Well, it's not Asians only.
Yeah.
I mean,
not me.
Everybody. Like I've seen it from everywhere.
Right.
It is a thing. It is a skill.
Right.
Communication, especially for something so subjective as art.
Yeah.
How do you sell your idea?
Yeah.
I think, and that's another thing I would tell people who are starting up. It's learn to sell your work. Be strategic when you're presenting your work. Like if you know that there is something really obviously wrong with your work, try not to present it.
Try not to smoke your way out.
Or it could be an advantage too. You can say you put in the mistake on purpose, so they focus on that and they forget about everything else. So you get a buy off on everything else except that one big thing.
Okay.
Right.
So it's not how you do it, but how you say it. Right?
Yes, how you say it.
Right.
That's why. So there's a bit of a strategy. Sometimes it'll come with experience. You'll know when you're ready to present, when you're ready to get a buy off. But it's tough to teach. Like that's really something you have to experience. It's a trial and error, really.
Wow.
But it's a fun way to do things sometimes. Just like you're thinking like, oh, can I get away with it? Like I don't want them to look over here, so I'll distract them over there. And it's worked out pretty well so far. It is a strategy. It is about even the supervisors do that with the clients.
Right.
With the client calls, they say like, let's bombard them with a lot of shots, pretty shots, and then the problem child, will slip it in, and then maybe they won't comment on it. So.
Okay. I hope the clients are not listening to this.
Insider trick.
I mean, I like the fact that you said that the way that you progress, over the years, and at your stage right now, you're more of like a senior, someone who the juniors will look up to
Yes,
and ask
yes.
questions to,
Yep.
and you mentor your juniors, which is quite interesting.
Mm.
Now, the next question is also, I want to lead up to this question. I think you mentioned about communications,
Mm.
right? So imagine like those young aspiring artists who is like wanting to join this line in creative work. What are the advice other than communications would you give them?
Well, when you're first starting out, I would definitely say just keep doing your thing. Like keep creating art. Train your eyes. Look at references. Listen, and take in feedback from your elders. And just learn from your mistakes. Really.
Right.
Just keep going. Even if you get rejected, keep going. Just do what you do best. Find your strength and your weaknesses, and then work on your weaknesses, but also work on your strength and become really, really good at what you're doing, right? And I guess that's something that's nothing really new. It's not, but that's the way we see it, because now I've told you on the side that I've been now partaking in interviews as well for applicants, and I've seen applicants where they know a little bit of everything, but it's really hard to know what they're good at.
Right.
And that's a problem, because then you don't know how to assign a project or a shot to that person, because you don't know. So if you really want to get hired, be clear in your work what you're good at. And then you can say what your weaknesses are. That's perfectly fine. We're not perfect. I have got my own weaknesses, like modeling. Like, I'm not the best modeler ever. I'm not the best animator either. But that's fine, because all of this can be learned, with the right teaching. But you need to have, again, we go back to having a direction, a goal. Like, you have to know what you want to be. Do you want to be the best hard surface modeler, or you want to be the best texture artist? That's helpful for us when we're hiring, right? Other applicants I've seen, you can immediately tell they have the fundamentals. They understand color, they understand composition. The execution may not be as refined as we would love to look like, but that can be built on. At least you've got the foundation. And to me personally, that's the most important thing. Like, have the creative fundamentals, know about perspective, know about lighting and colors and moods and how to direct your eye in your art. Everything else can be taught. I don't care if you don't know how to use Max or Maya. This can be learned easily. That's just a technical thing. But teaching composition, teaching how to see things that are wrong, that's much tougher, I think. That's much harder to teach.
Wow.
Because if you have an artist and he doesn't know when he's presenting something ugly, that's the worst.
Yeah,
that's the worst.
okay.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
Like, he's showing me something and he wants me to comment on it. I'm like, dude,
can you see that?
can you not see?
Yeah.
So that's tough. I think that's tougher. Like, he could be the best Houdini artist ever, but if his renders look like that, that's no good.
Yeah.
That's no good.
Wow, that's what I was saying. It's very rare to get like a hybrid. If you can get someone like that, oh man, that's like, it's a keeper for life.
I always believe that knowing the rules, the fundamentals of art design, is key. It's just important, because once you know the rules, you'll know how to break them.
Yeah.
And then you can develop your own style.
Right.
I've seen like the different types of artists that are in the industry. You've got the very technical guys who need references. They always have to follow exactly what the lighting does, with your chrome balls and your gray balls, and they have to match. They need those balls to match something. To me, that's kind of silly. Like, you don't need that. You just don't need it. You just immediately know what looks right and what doesn't. So my approach is more visual, for sure.
Right.
I'm definitely more visual artist. I know the technical side of things too, but that's not really the important thing, because like I said, you need to break the rules sometimes to make something look good. Like even though it may be technically correct, if it doesn't look good, it doesn't look good.
Yeah.
You know?
Agree, yeah.
So it's, and some people don't see that. They don't get that part. So definitely I would say work on your fundamentals. You know, do live drawings, man. You know, I really appreciated that in NYP.
Yeah.
I think those quick gesture drawings that we did, I think was essential to my development as an artist, to learn how to focus on the important things. And for listeners who don't know about gesture drawings, it's where you are looking at a model, for instance, and your instructor says, okay, you've got 5 seconds to draw that person. What do you focus on during those 5 seconds? And then later on you do 30 seconds, 1 minute, then 5 minutes. And I think that exercise was really made a switch in my mind how to approach things. Because I see it a lot of times where people just dive into details straight away. They forget the entire picture.
Right.
And they zoom in on that tiny little thing. They spend weeks and weeks and weeks, and they forget about the rest of the thing. And at least in the generalist department, that's a requirement. You need to put the entire image together first. And then you start refining the smaller stuff, right? And you'd be surprised how many people actually struggle with that.
Right.
Even supervisors, I would say. I'm not going to name names, but a lot of supervisors are like that. They like nitpick the smallest thing. But I'm like, step back. That's what our lecturer, I forgot his name, he was telling me once, like, put down the pencil, take one step back, and look at the picture.
Okay.
And I did that. I was like, okay, I get you. I was like doing the little thing there, working on the face for like 30 seconds, and then I didn't have the full body.
Right.
So that will always stick in my mind. That class that we had with him. That was great. That was the best advice I can give.
Yeah.
Do gesture drawings, 5 seconds, 1 minute, you know, quick ones.
Interesting.
Focus on the essentials.
Thanks for the school of thoughts.
Yeah.
Now, thanks for coming down again today. I think we have come to the end of the section. Do you want to let like the people know where to find you, or where can we get inspiration from your work?
Oh, yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. If
Okay.
you just type in my name, you'll find my profile.
Okay,
And
we'll
my work is there.
Plug a link over there. Feel free to add like Leo, and he'll connect. Alright. Can we ask you questions if you have any?
Sure. Definitely. Like, ping me. I'll reply when I got the time, for sure. But yeah, if there's anybody out there who's interested in becoming a generalist, please go on Disney's website, and we're still looking for people.
Yeah.
So,
See, you guys got an opportunity.
There's-
Like Leo said, this is the right time.
yeah, it
for
is.
artists.
Definitely is.
As long as you set a goal yourself and you are good, yeah, who knows?
It's definitely good for
Yeah.
local artists to
Yeah.
apply right now. That's a good time.
So Leo is an example that you see
One-
way back from poly, 15 years old, already set his goal, and this is where he is now. Wow, amazing.
Well, I mean, you're doing pretty well too.
Sometimes I think it's not just goal, but it's the conviction, right? Because sometimes you might have goal, but you midway, you sort of like, oh, you got derailed, you got like, oh, I'm not sure.
You get distracted, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's the conviction that actually got you to where you are also. Like goals and convictions.
Yeah.
You're really
Yes.
sure you hit that goal. What's the next goal? And go forward.
I
And that's
guess
where a lot of
you're
people
right.
stop also, right?
Yeah. I would say, I never had a doubt.
Yeah.
I just went for it. I'm like, I never thought, oh, what if it doesn't work out? Oh, what if? I mean, sure, it does cross my mind. Like, have a backup solution.
Yeah.
But that's more of a constructive way of thinking. Like,
Yeah.
okay, if this doesn't work, let me try it this way, right? Rather than saying like, I don't know, I hit the wall. Now what? Oh, I go back. No, just find a different way around it.
Yeah.
And one thing I learned though is really telling myself like nothing is impossible.
Yeah.
Seriously, like it's not impossible. I mean, reasonable goals, right? But yeah, it's just work it out. It's not that hard. I mean, you just gotta be focused and be smart about the decisions that you make, and take responsibility, I'd say.
Amazing. What a nugget of wisdom here. Right. Okay. So thank you so much for everyone. Thank you everyone for listening to Tea Talk with AMC Studio. If you are listening to this on SoundCloud, do follow us there. And if you are watching this on YouTube, subscribe to us and you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at AMC Studios. Bye.
Bye bye.